Call this meeting of the Coventry Municipal Fire Commission to order at 6:02 PM. Roll call. Hillary Lima, James Blank, Lieutenant McCann, Captain McAloon.
Here.
Brian Teston.
Here.
Russ McGillivray. Peter Rondeau.
Yeah.
Jillian Weinmiller.
Here.
Manager Perillo. Bob Saveni. Stephen Angel.
Here.
Chief Heiss.
Here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Emergency evacuation plan. In the event of an emergency, those present this evening can exit outdoors labeled 1 or 2 in the back of council chambers to the back parking lot or front lawn of town hall. Public comment on docketed items only. At this time, we'll accept public comment on those items on our agenda. Please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Members of the public on Zoom, please raise your hand to be let in. Public comment on those items on our agenda. Public comment going once, twice, 3 times. Public comment is now closed. We'll now move to new business for discussion and/or action. We have 2 this evening. First one, presentation by Brian Teston and Russell McGillivray on information needed to compare Coventry versus other towns mentioned versus the national standard mentioned. Mr. Teston.
Thank you. This is just a follow-up from our discussion last meeting. I'll go through the slides pretty quickly. We've incorporated some of the information that was requested, but the majority of the slides haven't changed. Starting from the beginning on population, no changes there. The heat map, no changes there. The call forecast, no changes there. Current staffing, no changes there. And then you get to the first slide that's new is called comparison to the national standard. This was mentioned last meeting. It was mentioned that there was a 2 to 2.5 frontline firefighters per 1,000 residents standard used nationally. And so what I did was I took the most conservative population forecast that we did earlier, and I applied that metric to it, 2 and 2.5, to show you what that equates to in terms of manpower and then trucks and service. So knowing that you need 8 firefighters for every truck that you have, it's just pretty simple math here. So this suggests that according to the national standard for a town of our size with 35,000 residents, the minimum to hit the minimum of this metric, 2 firefighters per 1,000, you would need to have 9 trucks in service. And if you wanted to get to the top end of this metric, 2.5, you'd have to have 11 trucks in service. And that equates to either 72, which is 9 trucks times 8 firefighters, or if you go to the upper side of it, the 11, then you would add another 16. Now, you guys could probably, and by the way, I don't know if we've waived the rules to allow for open discussion. I don't know if that's something you want to do.
Yeah, that's fine.
You guys could probably tell me better than I would know. There's what approximate percentage of like fire departments nationally actually meet the standard? It's probably not 100%, right? There's probably many that operate a truck down or.
It's usually the biggest cities, St. Louis,
Okay.
And whatnot. The smaller cities like ours try not to meet it because of budget restraints. But obviously the biggest cities, Providence meets it.
Sure.
It's trying, but it's the biggest cities that'll be ahead of us.
Okay. So, so this is helpful information, just in terms of comparing to a national standard, suggesting that you try to get to 9.
To that end,
Yep, go ahead.
so, it sounds like even if you become a municipal department, there's no national or federal obligation to meet that. Like it's not someone's coming around and checking to see that you are providing that. How does that work?
It's not a law, it's a standard 1710, which usually averages 4 to 6 guys per apparatus. We know budget-wise that we can't meet that in the state, city to city, so we try the best we can, and that goes along with contract talks.
Okay.
To just provide the best amount of manpower, those apparatus.
Are there certifications if you're meeting it or not meeting it? And does it affect like, insurances and things like that if you are or aren't?
With insurances, yeah, the insurances base it on time of travel, response time, and whether or not they're full-time, part-time, whatever it is. And if you look at those statistics, you'll see that there's comparisons there
Yeah.
between full-time.
So if you're severely below it and it to the point where it affects the response times, but you're 4 minutes away, 8 minutes away, et cetera. then-
Affects response times, the ISO rating,
Yep.
insurance rates.
Yep. Okay.
Kev, if I can, what do we consider now? We considered critically below that number here now?
We look at it as it now, we've gone through cases over the last couple of years. We had a chief come up and do a study. He was from Miami, City, Miami, and Miami-Dade County, obviously a much bigger area than Rhode Island, and did a comparison with ours. We could get that study. It was an arbitration case that we had a while ago, and we were under.
Yeah. So just as a reminder, right now we have essentially 52 frontline and 6 trucks in service. And then the next slide is a comparison to similar Rhode Island municipalities. I know that Russ also just recently gathered Smithfield, but I didn't have time to put that in here. There is a printout here that has all of the same information you see on this slide here, if it's easier for you to read. But it also has the admin staffing at the bottom. But this basically shows you that, okay, if the national standard says we should get to 9 trucks in service. When you compare Coventry to West Warwick, to North Providence, to North Kingstown, to Johnston, you could see how our trucks in service at 6 compares to what they have, 7, 7, 8, 8. And you can also see, you can look at the population of each one, the population density of each one, residents per square mile. We're more comparable to North Kingstown than the other 3 in that area, as well as calls. They're at 7,200. We're at around 7,200. So very comparable to North Kingstown, and they have 76 frontline firefighters, and they're actually on the, compared to that national standard, they're at 2.7. So they're at north of the high end of the metric. And then at the bottom, you can see what they have in terms of apparatus, rescues, engines, ladders, how they staff it.
Are the manning models for each of those apparatus, because you can see like they're all over the place. Like no, it doesn't feel standard necessarily, except for maybe the ladders, but is that just all determined contractually, or is it determined based on something else, like standards or?
Most of the time, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, most of the time it's two men on a truck, whether it's a rescue or an engine. It's usually 2 per truck, but to your point, there may be certain contractual issues that put you in a different position. Like my district, for example, we cross man and currently have 3 on a truck because we're at 12 full-time firefighters. So we're between 8 and 16. So when we were as low as 8, we had 2 per truck. We only had 1 truck. Now we're trying to get to 16. So right now we're at, we were able to add back 4, we're at 12. So when you have 12, what do? You can't put 2 on a truck and have 1 guy by himself. So you put 3 on the truck. So in that case, there's other ones on here. I don't know the specific contract situations of a North Providence or whatever, but they have more than 2 on a truck in some cases.
A lot of times what municipalities will do, they'll have, if there's 3 or 4 guys on a truck, they'll have floaters. So if there's somebody out on a sick leave or vacation time, that person would move into that particular truck, and that's why you see, especially North Providence.
But if I can add on to that, so that 1710 rating, right? So that standard, usually you try to meet that standard, but like you said, it's contractual. You never want to see less than 2 guys on a truck, but 3 is better than 2, obviously, and 4 is better than 3, but it's what you're able to afford. As we've seen over the last couple of weeks, we've been busy around town. Having more guys there is a big advantage.
Yeah, what we've found is, even going from 2 to 3 on a truck was helpful because you get the call in, you don't know what you're really facing until you get there. Sometimes it's a lift assist and the person's very large, and 2 guys aren't just gonna get them off the 3rd floor. Sometimes you need a 3rd person, or even a fourth person. So, and then the next 2 slides, the only changes here are after some of the comments last time, I added in a high level estimate of what each of these recommendations would cost. So it's consistent with what we talked about last time for adding 4 people in Anthony would be between 500 and 600,000. And then as a phase 2 step, adding 8 people to a station 7 would be about double that.
Brian, with that also, when you're looking at outside companies coming in to look at, obviously we had the dynamic study.
Sure.
ISO can also look at all those too, because a lot of the stuff that we don't have is administrative stuff too. They come in and evaluate your administrative staff also, besides your line trucks. We have that covered in here.
Yeah, I didn't go into admin staff because to your point, it's exactly right. I wanted to focus on what we were calling the frontline firefighters, people on platoon, because that is going to directly correlate to how many trucks in service we want to get to in town. So I think that's the most important first step. And then obviously in a municipal department, you'd look at chiefs, daytime positions needed. If you look at some of the on this sheet here, some of the positions that are listed here and what some of these other towns have, they have deputy chiefs. They have, we handle dispatch and comms as part of, Hopkins Hill, but with the town, but, they have separate positions for EMS, daytime positions for EMS where, right now, I think in town, we have, collateral pay in the fire, at least in my district, we're divvying up these duties amongst platoon firefighters.
I don't want to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but with the phase 1, I saw the second bullet, the MOA with the fire district. So my concern is that if this municipal does go through, the town council is going to take this, I don't want to say as gospel, but it's a very good document to kind of outlines everything. And I don't want to have the western end of town, like you keep saying, your station 1. if it is in municipal, we can add 3 people to Station 7, put another rescue in service instead of putting more people at Station 1. I'm just concerned with the whole time and population out there. I just don't want that to be lost.
Yeah, my point is that you would need to add 8 people, 8 full-time employees to Station 7 to put an extra truck in.
You wouldn't if it was a municipal, because then everyone is together. It's not 4 districts anymore. So you can move your 4 extra people to Station 7, add 4 people, and then you have another truck. Like, it doesn't have to be.
Yes, you can absolutely reallocate
True.
staffing all over town, and you should,
Yeah, no, I
find
just,
the
I just
best
don't want it
mix.
to get lost because it is such a good document. I'm sure you guys will be looking at it. So I just don't want everything to beeline to Station 1. I do want other stations to, you guys have Station 4 and Station 6. Out in Western, we have Station 7. Like, it's a long drive, so.
The
That's my
reason,
only point.
the reason I present it this way today is because today there still are boundaries.
Oh, definitely.
And a municipal department, let's say the recommendation goes to town council and you want to act on it, it's going to be a process to get to a point where you erase those boundary lines, right? So in the meantime, we're giving information to everyone in town. We're saying, hey, we have 6 trucks in service. The standard says you should be at 9. Other comparable towns to us are at least at 7 or 8. The reason one of the reasons that this commission was created was because people have been saying, we have a public safety issue
Yeah.
that we need to solve. And this was created as a result. So this is good. But when we look at it today, the town council could act sooner than 2 years from now, sooner than when boundaries are erased.
Telling you, sorry to interrupt, I'm looking at these two who just are about to send a budget packet tomorrow. There's not 600 grand I'm gonna find for you. And I'm telling you flat out, and that preempts a decision by the council to do anything with this at all. And ultimately, it's their decision. There's no way, and I'm looking at you guys, like 600K to find in this budget cycle is gonna be near impossible.
Okay. The council's decision.
I can't, yeah. And don't let that get twisted as you don't want to solve a public safety issue. That would be a huge expense to add in any budget year, whether it's public safety, whether it's anything. That's huge. Just to know that $750,000 approximately is about a 1% tax increase. So you're almost asking for that.
Yeah, and in my district, it's a 22% increase. So that's why we haven't gone from 12 to
Yeah,
16,
sure. But I think also to Jillian's point, if you're thinking of this holistically as when the boundaries are separated, that's when I think you open up the ideas of the different phased approaches.
Yeah, and I think that Brian has a great idea. I'm just saying, once it gets to you guys, I don't want you to beeline to this once the lines are not there and say, oh yeah, it looks great, Station 1 gets another truck, and then leave Western out of it.
No.
Not Western, but the Western end.
If I may. So ideally, you're looking for the right amount of trucks, right amount of personnel there. That's up to the fire chief. Whoever's going to be the fire chief there is going to have that final decision. Do we all agree on that?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
staff
not gonna be up to the
allocation,
commission,
everything.
no. It's strictly the chief's job. Leading out west, and I'm with Jill on that one because we spend a lot of time out there. They come to us a lot. Danny's been on a truck. He's been out. That's a long ride out there. So you want to provide the right coverage. So that's an operational thing. That's up to.
Yeah, no, if this council gets into which stations are manned, that's way into operations. The point is gonna be, how many firefighters do you want to fund? How many apparatus do you want to, fund? That's gonna be the base. I'm not telling Chief Heiss, what his shift model should be for officers, or overtime, that's way beyond what the town council should be getting involved in or can get involved in. So, but yeah, to look in this budget cycle would preempt the charge of this committee and what the commitment was for the council to receive a fleshed out option. So I appreciate the sentiment, and I know that time is of the essence to solve this issue, but just 600K, out of thin, and Dan can chime in, but
Oh, that would be our whole capital budget for the year. It'd be very, very difficult to do it in, said, by next month, it has to in front of the council.
Yeah.
Ryan, a different question.
Hmm.
So is it just you guys don't have the current funding to hire for, or you don't have you can't recruit for either? Is it both
We could recruit for,
the funding you guys don't have?
yeah, it would represent a 22% tax increase, and I just don't have that in the levy.
Without talking budgets or contracts, obviously our idea is to get it all under one umbrella that gives you the freedoms to erase those boundaries. And for that operational chief to move guys around as he sees fit, move the trucks around for the day as he sees fit. That's one big advantage of this, of having this done, without even talking money.
yeah, is there a scenario where if the town council does decide it wants to go a municipal route, that say it's in the year leading up to officially coming into the FY '27 budget, the districts could find a way to pass guys around, or like, how does that, what is that? I don't know how that would
Yeah,
work.
well, you become a municipal, everybody's under one umbrella, under one chief, under one, under one administration.
Yeah.
So that gives them that leeway to move as he sees fit as a boss.
I think what a good question would be is, what are the fire districts collecting for overall taxes now?
I think they provided, we provided the levies, right, the certification, so I didn't get all of them.
Well, my other question is, we've calculated what the amount is when there's no legal bills among them, there's no full-time tax collectors, and there's no treasurers. So does that not add up to something close to 600,000 at least in a given fiscal year among all 4 districts?
It would also be, you wouldn't have 4 chiefs either. It's more than just the
That's my
admin staff.
point. Like, when you merge, there's, in my opinion, salary costs that should add up to this amount that you need, no?
There's a lot of things that have overlap. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are a few of them.
So, like, to your point, if you want this to happen, there's other ways. I cannot carve out. Because if 600K comes out of my capital, then that means 600K then is gonna get pulled from road paving and then so on and so forth. So,
I understand that.
Yeah.
I look at it as two different issues. There's, the primary mandate of this commission, which is what does a municipal department look like, and provide a report to the town council. But in doing the work, you're going to come across, or you're going to find data that suggests to you, here's the situation you're in, and here's, the issues that you face. And those should be highlighted, and any, if action could be taken to remedy a situation today before something bad happens, it should be, at least considered or brought to the attention of the right people.
Yeah.
That's all.
If you look at the tax rates now across the board, Hopkins Hill, Central, Weston, and Anthony, every tax rate is different.
Yeah.
I think Oz is being one of the higher ones, Weston right alongside. If you brought all the taxes to the same value and the town took over a municipal department, that's what we should be looking at, where the budget would be if we basically set everybody's tax rate
Yeah,
at
unified tax rate.
unified tax rate, and then see where we're at then. I mean, right now, I think we're collecting like 11.5 million. When I ran the numbers for us to have the 7 trucks that you're talking about in service, I was right around $13 million. If we levy that tax rate, then that 600,000 you're talking about, that kind of comes into play on where we're going to be for the first couple of years. And then as, the town grows and we have more people coming in, yeah, then our chief, like Kevin said, can actually start moving up to 7, 8 trucks.
yeah, I'm not saying no to considering this solution. I'm just saying it's not gonna come out of the town. There's no way it's gonna come out of the town budget. It's gonna have to come out of some way when the with the unification of these entities and elimination of duplicative costs.
I think that's one of the, maybe in the next couple of meetings we should look at, is if we take the taxes, set a tax rate, one of the higher tax rates for fire taxes. See what the overall, if we put the entire town on that tax rate, what we're looking at for numbers. And then we'll have a true value of, where we stand and how much money we could need moving forward.
I think you should do multiple scenarios. I wouldn't just pick the highest. See what the options are with all different ones.
And I totally think, honestly, I think you're right. I think honestly, my rate might come down a little bit, where,
Anthony's no picnic.
yeah, and Central's might come up a
Does
little.
everyone know their residential tax rate off the top of their head? Ours is 193.
I think
We're 167.
But they're all in that range.
we bring everybody's tax rate up to, again, multiple scenarios, but we incorporate Hopkins Hill, two-tier tax rate and see where that kind of sets us.
The tax rates are, they're an indicator, they're a function of what your budget costs you and what the property values and the demographic of your individual districts are. So they're going to vary just based on the virtue of that. But when you add the four budgets together and you get a total dollar amount, and then you add the property values together and you do the division, you'd get a unified tax rate of whatever that number is. It'll be somewhere average of the four, right? Depending on what the property values are. Nope, that was it.
The next item was most recent tax certification and budget for each district. I don't know who kind of collected this or wants to start.
We were looking for that information so that we could try to put together some blended rate, like was just mentioned, but we haven't received every tax certification at this point, so we weren't able to go forward. But just one thing to keep in mind, and it's something maybe for the solicitor is gonna have to look into, just legislatively, the whole process. I had a conversation with representative from Department of Municipal Finance earlier this week, and they indicated that they have to do a little research, but currently they don't see a mechanism where by the town adding a new department, so just providing an additional service, it doesn't give us the ability to exceed the 4% tax levy. So we'd have to, get enabling legislation, but they're not even sure how that would all work in the process, but that, I'm assuming, is gonna be a lengthy process to try to go through.
Well, it's different than what the statute calls for presently in exceeding the 4%. Right now, when you exceed the 4%, it has to do with known budgetary reasons. This is absorbing an existing tax rate. So it's a bit different than that. It's not a true percentage raise so much as it is absorbing a rate, which is why I think it's important to homogenize this rate. At some point, whether it's the council or whomever, you're going to have to agree on a rate, because it's not like we can go to municipal affairs in the legislature and say, well, if you do this, it's this number, and if you do that, we've got this number. That's not going to fly. So someone has to agree on what's going to make this work, if that's what folks want to do. And then we can go forward and have those discussions with them. They don't do it every day of the week. And it's certainly not something that's going to get done in this term. It's too late in the term. This would require meetings, I would suggest, to occur in the fall, and for the legislation to be pre-filed in December so that it could be heard as early as January. It's going to take them a little bit to put together the right fiscal analysis. So,
Yeah, exactly. Also with, if you remember East Greenwich, when they did theirs, they did a one-time adoption of legislation to amend that 4%, but just to throw that out there.
So what's the timing on the kind of blended rate scenarios? I would do a few to see what your potential budget looks like for some different scenarios. Unless you're just averaging them, I don't know.
Yeah, again, my thought process was simply, we know what what each district currently raises if we get their tax certification. Just drop that into our system saying, okay, this is how much revenue we need to support the current budgets, and then you back into the rate, because the rate still has to stay, we have. And then there's many things that come into play, because you have, the state essentially froze the tangible tax rate at this point, so everybody may have a different tangible tax if you have a tangible tax, but that rate's frozen, so we gotta get adjustments there. So it's just a lot to work through, but again, as soon as I can get everybody's certification, even if it's from last year's budget, at least we could start looking at the most recent certification that you do have. We could put something together. Again, it's gonna be a ballpark, right? We know it's not gonna be a definitive number at this point, but I think we just say, based on everything that's in here, to raise whatever 93 million or whatever that is in tax revenue, here's what our tax rates would have to be across the
And I think too, we have to decide, are we trying to man 52 or are we trying to man 72? And what's that number that we're trying to raise?
I don't think, we're not gonna jump. I wouldn't do that. I think you show scenarios. I think you show the phased approach of phase one would show that you're adding the 4, and that impact on a blended rate, and then what phase 2 impact would be.
Yeah, so I think it's, looking at those budgets, like you said, those phases, but then also with probably the next item that's on your agenda is looking at the projected 10-year capital replacement plan that I think Russ put together and sent out to everybody. Based on his plan here, he's looking at fiscal year 2027, we'd have purchases of about 2.1 million in apparatus. So obviously, if you're going to bonding for that or whatever you're doing, that's it.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question is, what, can we calc what the average, what on average we should be socking away, whether it's in debt service or in capital for a department line item to keep up with this, so we're not, or,
I mean, right now, like I said, our capital budget's between 500,000 and 600,000 for the entire town.
yeah, we know that's not what it's supposed to be.
It's just something to say on that. I mean, one of the things we learned 2 meetings ago was that none of the departments, given their present limitations, are leveraging the ability to get free trucks, basically through grants. And that's huge. I mean, when Little Central Falls can basically have everything from new equipment to new trucks in like 14 months, no reason in the world why Coventry can't do it. Cranston does it, Providence does it, they all do it. And it may be of value to this group to hear a presentation from the town's grant writer so that there's some expectation as to how that debt service burden might come off the shoulders of the town in a realistic way so that, you're phasing in trucks over time. You may have a few that need some Band-Aids while you phase in the new ones. But when you start, you're talking millions of dollars that you folks over the years, and it never occurred to me, you folks have shouldered that in your budgets, and your taxpayers have shouldered that debt service.
Yep.
Other communities, if you were a unified district, they don't pay dollar for trucks. They get them for free, or there's significantly, the debt service is significantly discounted.
Yeah, especially with the situation we have with a couple of trucks that are out there to be replaced, that anything over 20 years is almost 100%, because, they're antique. You also look at what other towns do as far as, like I said, socking away some money is using the EMS billing. Most cities and towns do that. They don't put that back in. They just take out all that, put it into a sunshine fund.
Yeah, they do it as a restricted receipt account, so it's a dedicated source of funding, just like an impact fee
Right,
almost.
yeah.
I think having access to a grant writer, I mean, we've actually put in for grants for a new tanker for the last 5 years. We just haven't gotten them. But we don't have a grant writer. It's typically our chief that does it, and he obviously has other things to do. So just having access to that would be very helpful.
The most important thing with the grant writer that we have is that she just doesn't write the grants. She has access to getting the bulletins on just what's available. Nobody in this room would have access to that. That's not our business. You know, you guys are in the business of life safety, for heaven's sakes. So there's a lot of money there that, you know, the town wouldn't necessarily have to spend, but to get a sense of just what that might look like and how to get that moving probably would help this group a little bit.
That's what, with having a good chief of a department head like that, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Dan, it sounds like for agenda items upcoming, I think we can start to hone down maybe Brian and Russ's information presentation to keeping it to labor only and staff trucks only. And then to start to get that in a form that can go be presented. It sounds like a blended tax rate estimate presentation, and then maybe asking if Lisa can come and talk about what she sees for available opportunities, whether it's state or federal for public safety.
I know the Chief Brown put in for a safer grant. You guys didn't get, I don't believe. You guys also put in for safer grants, other districts?
Yeah, I know I talked with Brian over the last contract, about doing that, and they didn't on the last round. I now know the Coventry had gotten rejected. I forget the reason why. You know, it's next year also.
Yeah, we could put in, so like, to say I'm looking for those 4 firefighters to get from 12 to 16. I could put in for a safer grant, but the issue that I face is I'm going to get funding for like 3 years, right? And then after that, it's on me to pay the full bill, right? And so if I said it's going to cost me 600,000, which is a 22% tax increase, what I need to do is I need to get my taxpayers on board with a 4% tax rate for the next 5 or 6 years to get to that $600,000 more, so that I could fund these guys after that 3 years expires. And that's hard to do, you know?
Dan, do you have the list of items we said we'd talk about that? I'm trying to find that document of, that's kind of gone to hell, but yeah, what's on that list that we haven't gotten to at this? I'm not just this week, but I'm like curious now. Oh, okay, perfect.
All right, can we use the mics, please? Thank you.
Again, it's printed off of Vision, usually, gets signed by your tax assessor, and then it has to be submitted to the Department of Municipal Finance. So I'm looking for that actual report because it gives the full values, any exemptions you have, and then the rates that are applied.
All right, so
Getting with this week's agenda, there's 2 of them that are in there, which is the one from Central Coventry and then the one from Hopkins Hill. So if you can get that report.
Okay, yeah, I'll ask our tax collector. I got this from our board of directors and then the chief, but sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I appreciate it. I realize your budget is, you said early April on that. That's why even if we can get the last year's, it would give us something to look at.
Yeah, we have a working budget right now. We don't know if it's going to get voted yes or no, so I didn't want to give that to you.
Thank you.
So I see about 3 buckets that we need to get to left. One is kind of what we talked about in terms of the legal piece. So any updates to town code and ordinances, and then the necessary state legislation. So that's one bucket we have left. The other one is kind of what we just started talking about, recurring revenue and fee structure and transition from the district tax collection to town tax collection, the logistics. And then last, I'm sorry, it's more like four-ish, or maybe we can combine. Another bucket is the budget and 3-year projection, and then overall fiscal impact on town budget. And then lastly is what would a potential table of organization and leadership look like, consolidating all of the officers and ranks, and the MERS contribution. And then also we need to discuss how and where we roll in Western, given they're not.
Also, the contract, what's the contract gonna look like? One unified contract. And then I know part of, maybe it's part of legal, but do we know does each district have to vote to disband or collapse whatever's in there?
Yeah, that's part of the legal, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were created with an act of enabling legislation. I would imagine that it would be the assembly that would, dissolve us, right? Take away taxing authority.
Well, there's 2 separate thoughts here, and they're related, but they're in separate lanes. So the first one is, when we do the state legislation for the 4% increase, there'll be a raft of legislation that touches different parts of the general laws, and one of which will be to abolish the districts themselves. As far as contracts go, labor agreements, the term is called a novation. They would have to novate the contract, and there would be one contract. That's not as big a deal as you might think it is. I mean, it really isn't. You're going to have, it's not like anybody comes kicking and screaming. You're going to have the parties in a room. You're going to do a new contract. And what an opportunity to clean up some of the language, I'm sure, that all of you could tell horror stories about, right? You get a brand new contract that everybody is happy with, and it's unified. The biggest thing in the contract, obviously, is going to be the pay scales. My understanding is that there are some different pay scales by position in each of the districts.
Over the last 2 years, we've been able to, like, I represent the Central guys and I represent the Anthony guys. Danny represents Hopkins Hill, and we've collectively negotiated contracts to keep the pays very close. They're not so far apart as you think.
So I didn't know.
With the
That's why
work
I
of-
just threw that out there.
Yeah, no,
That's
but I'm
good.
saying we've
By rank. So
we've kind of we've been kind of anticipating this over the last few years, going to a municipal job. So over the past couple of contracts, we've been able to sit and kind of get everybody on one.
Yeah, I mean, if I can suggest to the work group, I won't say I'm not concerned about local legislative changes, state legislative changes and contracts. That's last. That papers the deal, so to speak. If you're gonna do this and try to fund it for the next budget cycle, that legislation's got to get in and pre-filed, in my opinion, by December. So that assumes that you get to a point by the fall where there's some will that's been expressed to have a municipal department. You get to that point, we just turn our attention to drafting legislation, meeting with legislative counsel at the State House, and talking with the legal piece in the Department of Municipal Affairs, so it doesn't look like we're jacking the municipal tax rate to 8.5% when we're really merging in a department, that kind of thing. I think that's all workable,
I do,
especially after the week.
It is workable. Like I said, we've been already talking with people at the state just to give them the heads up of what's coming. So when, they're not blindsided, and we've sat with all our reps and whatnot. So, yeah.
I do want to say though, I mean, I know you said the other three. I mean, Western is not included in that. So I know that there are people on Western that are not.
They would be.
I know, I'm just saying, like, it's not the same pay scale as everyone else. They're not wanting this. So I don't think it's going to be as kosher as you're saying. Just throwing that out there. The other three, I think, will be easy, but Western will not be.
Jillian, are you saying the people of Weston or the Weston department itself doesn't want to be part of this?
I haven't surveyed the taxpayers, but the board is very against it. And a lot of our members, I mean, a lot of our guys are going to lose their job. We have a lot of per diem members. It's a very different thing that they do out there versus a union department. So I don't want to, I know I'm kind of stomping on the ground right now, but like it's not as kosher as you might think. There will be pushback.
So you have 4 full-timers, that correct?
We are actually in the process of hiring a fifth, plus our chief, so 6.
So would they be interested in joining the union and joining a full-time fire department, or they'd rather not be part of this whatsoever?
I haven't asked them. I do know that a lot of or I'm going to say maybe half of them already came from this union or your union. So I don't know. But at least on the board level, I know my chief isn't wanting it. I know all the per diems obviously don't. So just throwing that out there.
Just one comment on, you had mentioned the MERS. That's really something that we'd have to get the state involved in. You'd have to get the retirement system. I have no way of calculating that. It'd be actuarial valuation. You'd have to get determined. If Weston were to be included, determination of the years that they put in service, is that already vested? That has to be factored into the term, and what's the retirement date? So, just to be frank with you, there's no way I could calculate that. We need the actuaries, and you would need Rhode Island's retirement system to do that calculation for us.
Mhm. Yeah, careful with personnel. So is there someone here who could take the homework in terms of organizational structure and inventorying, how many of each we have in terms of lieutenant, captain, whatever? We can get an inventory of that. And then maybe the pay scales can come to the table. I know, Jillian, it'll be a little different for you, but we got to find a
We have
baseline comparison.
different pay scales for people. It's not it's not by rank. We don't really have ranks out
We have
there.
individual employee contracts.
Yeah.
So for privacy purposes, you're going to have to come up with some sort of a legend that, like person 1, person 2, as opposed to lieutenant. You can have the line in lieutenant for you guys,
It's a range.
right? But for you, you'd have to have,
We only have 6 people. I could give you their pay
Yeah.
scales. That's easy, but
but you,
it-
just
it's
to
not by
identify
the
them,
Same as them.
get a sense of what duties they have to try to figure
Same.
out where they go.
It's just by their qualifications, basically.
We just don't want to name
Years.
anybody.
No, definitely.
So I'm thinking, so Kevin, does that feel doable if you can kind of
It's,
coalesce?
we already have in one of the documents here that
Oh, we do?
that Pete has with all the ranks of how many each rank that we have.
Okay.
It's just a matter of adding.
All right, so we just got to add the pay scales. So I'm looking here in terms of next steps. So if for the March 27th meeting, we can have the blended rate ready, and then the the labor hierarchy and pay scales. I think that's a big step. I think for the April 10th one, if we can be ready with some preliminary discussion on the legislation and code and ordinance piece, and then maybe invite Lisa, Dan, to come and talk about that. And then if we can continue, if we can kind of put a bow on the labor piece along with fiscal impact and budget projection with 3-year forecast for April 24th. I think that makes sense. And then in the month of May, based on how things go with these next 3 meetings, we're probably at a place where we can start discussing, summarizing what we found and how we want to format it for a report. Does that sound doable? Or am I missing anything? Okay. Anything else from folks on items on our agenda? All right. Then I will take a motion to adjourn at 6:53.
Motion made.
Motion or second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.